I don't think the industry would be anywhere close to what it is today if Microsoft wasn't involved.
I've heard so much about this simulation that you all did. Did you play Ken Kutaragi? Did I read that?
I did, yeah. And scaringly, I won.
Hello and welcome to the Game Business Show with me, Christopher Dring. It's terrifying to think it's been 20 years since the Xbox 360 was launched. This time back in 2005, we'd seen the games at E3, we'd seen the reveal show on MTV, and we were getting excited for its big release. To celebrate, we decided to catch up with Peter Moore, who was charged with launching the console back then. Now, we conducted this interview with Peter a few months ago, but with Xbox in the news right now after making so many cuts across its business, I felt now is the time to share this interview with you, as it kind of provides an insight into a time when Microsoft was the underdog trying to find a place in this industry, tried to compete with the big PlayStation and take it down a peg or two. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for joining us, Peter. Welcome to the show. You joined Xbox after your experience with Sega. So I'm going to go back a little bit, back before 360. So you joined Xbox.
You're going back a lot, Chris.
Yeah. Well, you joined Xbox after your experience at Sega, right, with Dreamcast. And I mean, did that whole experience not scar you from the console space?
Actually, quite the opposite. I mean, Dreamcast to me was a trailblazer. I mean, we had this, and Dreamcast, what are we now, 26 years since its launch. It's difficult to describe to people that are not in their 40s or 50s what Dreamcast meant to gaming because of the online function. Albeit dial-up and clunky and inelegant and frequent drops of packets of information going through, but it blazed a trail. And I've often said the Dreamcast passed the baton to the Xbox 360, which with Microsoft's resources was able to take the Sega dream and build upon it and obviously put, quite frankly, billions of dollars behind it because of the belief in all of us coming together, no matter where we were in the world, to play games against each other, with each other, cooperatively, competitively. And no, I was disappointed and I was saddened, but you could see the opportunity. It was clear to everybody during that period that online gaming was the future. And the phrase I coined there, we're taking gamers where gaming is going. Now, we couldn't complete the journey with them, but certainly Xbox and obviously PlayStation, were able to do that, and to a lesser extent, Nintendo.
Yeah. Well, so the Dreamcast obviously went up against, it was basically PlayStation 2, right? I mean, it just
right.
That anything that went up against that, whether it was even the Xbox, but like GameCube and Dreamcast, just found itself up against a very formidable opponent. I guess you didn't feel that was an impossible mountain to climb.
No, I mean, look, every incumbent needs a challenger to punch them in the face, right? And, from the perspective of what Sega was keeping PlayStation honest, they would not have delivered the power of the PlayStation 2 without the specter of the Dreamcast. They needed to step up their game. I've always admired them in how they did it, through flooding us fear, uncertainty, and doubt placed in the minds of the gamer of that time, calling the Dreamcast a transition platform that, sure, go buy one, but the moment the PlayStation 2 comes out in March of the following year, you're going to buy one of those. And to their credit, they placed that uncertain doubt into the minds of gamers. So we just didn't have the resources to fulfill the dream of online gaming. It shipped with a 56K board modem here in the United States, and then eventually we got a broadband adapter to go in as broadband adoption. But when the Dreamcast was shipped, 80% of the world was still on dial-up. And so we had to find ways to deliver a decent gaming experience through dial-up. And, and obviously, I think we had a strong relationship with Microsoft. And towards the end, as it was very clear that we were not going to be able to survive against the juggernaut that was the PlayStation 2, Microsoft was very supportive and helped us. And I think also saw what we were doing and thought, we can do this except times 100. And I think that's where it ended up. Yeah.
So let's jump to 360, right? Because I've heard so much about this simulation that you all did. Did you play Ken Kutaragi? Did I read that?
I did. Yeah. And scaringly, I won, which should have been
It's called wargaming. And what you do, if I remember rightly, consultants come in, and I think it was McKinsey that comes in and sets up a wargaming, 2-3 days of, okay, this is who you are. This is what's going to happen. How are you, in my case, Ken Kutaragi, is going to take on Xbox? And it allows you to expose the thinking of the competition. And then what are you going to do to be able to combat that? So, yeah, I took on the role of Ken Kutaragi and basically attacked what I thought the weaknesses of Microsoft and Xbox and the Xbox 360 and hard drive capabilities and all price points, everything that you do in a wargaming environment. And then you have independent judges who are typically the consultants. And yeah, scaringly, I won, which shouldn't have happened. In the end, it all worked out very well. But yes, and it's part of what companies do when they're going into a nose-to-nose competitive environment. Is that it's the art of war. You've got to understand what's going on in the head of the other guys, and the best way to do it is to go into a wargaming environment.
Have you done that sort of thing before or since? Or
we did it a little bit in my Reebok days, unfortunately against Nike, and you do this simulations of situations, and you've got to get inside the head of your competitor and then figure out how you can compete or in some way neutralize their competitive advantage. Yeah, I mean maybe it's an American thing, but it's pretty standard over here.
Yeah. And how useful is it? How useful was it for Xbox 360?
I think again, this is 20 years ago. I'm trying to think through all of the details, but it was very much, we immersed ourselves and we researched Sony, how they launched the original PlayStation, what we felt they would be thinking in Japan and also in the US. And so it was Ken Kutaragi, it was Kaz Hirai, I think it was already Jim Ryan over there in the UK, and would think through from their perspective, how they perceive you, Microsoft, and how they would perceive the Xbox and what they would do with those perceptions to compete with them. So you're unpeeling this onion as you research, and then you gameplay, you stand up, you make presentations, you have mock marketing meetings, and it allows you to get into the head of the other guys, and you take on that facade where I'm thinking like I'm Ken Kutaragi.
Yeah. Well, I don't suspect you remember, but I'm guessing what really happened, what Ken Kutaragi and Sony really did, was not what you'd not.
No, I mean, I think the price point. Who never envisioned the price point? Look, if I'm Kutaragi, I'm going, okay, it's Microsoft. They've got no legacy. We're gonna as we did with Sega, we're going to put them in a corner and we're going to place doubt in the minds of the gamer. And they don't have the studios yet that we, Sony, have. And we still have the legacy of everything that comes out of Japan is truly authentic. And here you've got a company that's more famous for Windows, Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. How on earth can they be in the entertainment business and make entertaining games? And so these are the types of things that you do. And I recall being completely immersed in that world of PlayStation and picking holes in Microsoft's strategy that I also knew very well, obviously, because I was responsible for it.
Well, you mentioned the fudding of the Dreamcast, right? And part of that, I remember you telling me last year, you had like the bouncer on stage. It was E3, right? Where they were showing off games that weren't real, right? But looked very, very impressive and looked certainly more impressive compared to what you were showing, perhaps. Now I believe they did try that again for the 360, the Killzone 2 demo being famous. Yeah. But it was a demo.
You call it a demo. I would call it a movie.
But that was them sort of trying to go, I don't know.
No, it's exactly the same tactics of placing uncertainty and doubt and creating a very expensive movie, using elements of the game. But when the game came out, and if you could dig out the movie now and look at when the game came out, completely BS. And I knew it that night when I watched it. I thought, there's no way they're delivering this experience. There is absolutely no way. But to the gamer, they were doing the same thing, to your point, as they did to us at Sega, which is go, all right, you guys, yeah, cute little Xbox 360 coming out, but the big boys will be out with the PlayStation 3, so you should hang around and wait for that, because look what we can do.
Yeah. But I don't think people believed them this time. I think that was the key difference. It feels, at least looking back and reading back on it, I'm trying to remember the moment myself. You said that with Killzone 2, there was a lot more doubt from gamers around that. And
I mean, I think that lessons were learned. The positioning for the PlayStation 2 was the emotion engine, and some bizarre reason they said this will be like Toy Story coming to life, and rich 3-dimensional imagery and super smooth 60 frames a second. All of the things that they're like politicians, right? You promise so that somebody buys it, and then do you deliver on it? Probably not, but too late then, because you've got their vote. And so I think, but to your point, I think the industry, games journalists in particular, were going, wait, we've seen this movie before, no pun intended. And based on what we think we know about the capabilities and the specifications of what this PlayStation 3 is about, and we're looking at this, and there's no way they're going to deliver it. And I think that fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And that's exactly what was going on in that second go around here. So.
Well, I'll jump back a little bit, because E3 obviously was spring. And again, I don't know how well you remember this, but obviously the viral campaign for Xbox 360, according to the internet, and I don't remember this at all, was the alternative reality game OurColony, which is, I think, a successor to I Love Bees, which was the Halo 2 thing. It's such a trip down memory lane looking at ARGs and these sort of I miss when marketing was this creative. What was it about that route that made it a good thing to start with at Ken to 360? Was it because of the online capabilities?
I think you do these viral campaigns and you start like putting things on the internet and little clues and little Easter eggs, and people go, wait, what's this all about? And it unravels. And so the marketing team had created this viral journey over a period of time. It also allows you to get your marketing going in a unique way without disclosing a lot of detail. And so it was this classic journey. And this was popular in the 2000s, of these kind of little viral journeys where, it's kind of pre-social media, remember, but you're going online and we're feeding you clues and little bits of direction, and we're piquing your interest and you're playing along. And so that was the idea, with the thought that as you continue to solve these little puzzles and figure out where this thing is going, you're going to learn about it wasn't clear at first whether this was anything to do with Xbox or Xbox 360. So, but the team did an amazing job, and enough people, and it created enough buzz, even if you weren't playing it, because people go, wait, this is cool, and so you would talk to people like yourself, games journalists, and they were fascinated because it was unusual. This was still in the days, again, 20 years ago, of, you're still doing magazines and you're doing outdoors, big billboards, and you're doing TV commercials. So very sledgehammer over the head type marketing, not what we were then doing, which is very precise and very intriguing, very intellectual. We weren't talking down in any way to the gamer. In fact, we were giving them psychological challenges and puzzles to solve. And I think they appreciated, if you will, both the elegance and the intellect that came along with it. It was very unique.
According to the internet, GameSpot eventually cottoned onto it, I think a few weeks after it launched, and did a story on it on their website, and it crashed the OurColony website. Suddenly everyone wanted it. So that would have created another story, and it would have all added to that. I actually read about some of the viral campaigns that followed OurColony, and they sounded so obscure. One of them apparently featured talking rabbits. I worry that in today's world of brand guidelines, and you need to fit within, what's the overall picture, the vision, that it felt quite random, some of this stuff. It didn't necessarily match it didn't feel like it was very in keeping with the overall, whatever the marketing.
We had, as part of our team, core part of our team, Jay Allard. And as I recall all of these, Jay was a little bit of the driving force behind all of this, because that's the way his mind works. It's not linear. And so the idea of, we needed to be different, right? We just couldn't put up the same ads, the same kind of genre. And we just needed to be different. And we needed to show that we being Microsoft, that we could do things very differently and speak in a way to the community that showed that we respected their intellect and actually try to do things in a very different, kind of quirky way. And I think it succeeded.
On the flip side of that, so you did these viral, sort of very gamer friendly sort of things. You then did the reveal, which was with MTV, Elijah Wood and the Killers. Like, it was like almost the polar opposite to all that, a big sort of celebrity backed MTV reveal. I think the idea of games consoles being revealed on MTV feels strange to perhaps gamers today. Where did the idea come from? Was it something that where did that come from?
Well, MTV was getting to what we needed to from its demographic. And look, remember, in the Dreamcast days, we launched on the VMAs, MTV VMAs, and did all of our marketing. It launched on 9/9/99, and we took over the MTV Video Music Awards and in New York City, and fortuitously was also on 9/9/99. And then the following year, we did a takeover the VMAs as well. So MTV had always been, and from video game advertising, quarter of a century ago, it was a platform and certainly a network that allowed you to get to who the gamers were at that time. Let's call it slightly older than teens, but still in a way that allowed you, because digital advertising still was in its nascency and really hadn't kicked off to the level that obviously it is today. But MTV delivered demographically from a cost per, what's known as a CPM. We thought it was cost effective. I had done it at Sega, and I felt they were a great partner, and we decided to do it, and you're also trying to get credibility still at this point in video games. It's not like it is today where pretty much everybody plays and everybody takes it seriously. It was still very much, the classic boys in their bedrooms, and something that a phase you go through, and a lot of people saw it as trivial. And look, during that same period, I had appeared in front of Senate hearings trying to justify the creativity, the McCain-Lieberman hearings, with Greg Fishback of Acclaim and Strauss Zelnick, who was not in video games then, but was BMG Music, because it was ourselves in games and music that were trying to allow the artists to be creative and not have boundaries, bad language and violence and all of this. And it was about getting credibility to a generation that absolutely didn't understand what games were all about and poo-pooed them as a waste of time. And in fact, as being a negative influence on society. So, to your question, MTV was the perfect platform during those days to be able, slightly rebellious, to be able to deliver a message to the demographic we needed to get to.
Yeah, I watched it back recently, just Elijah Wood and the Killers look so young for starters. But there's an entire element where they send a load of, I think, what you would describe as MTV kids, quite cool American teenagers to Rare in the UK, in Warwickshire, and they're just walking around talking to Rare developers, and it is unbelievably cringy. It is good, but it's obviously I can see why that was, otherwise it would have looked very nerdy. But so after that, you did the review, and then you went to E3, and we talked about E3 a moment ago. But that was like, I don't remember E3 2005. I was just before my time in the industry. But PS3, 360, Wii, or Revolution as it was called at the time. I don't know. For me, because I've been to so many E3s, they start to merge into one. But this feels like one I probably remember. Do you remember much about it?
Well, yeah. I mean, we were. This was our launch E3, if you will, or pre-launch E3 for later that year. And obviously, from the perspective of having to justify, this is, again, it's 20 years ago. But if I recall, this was the E3 where Killzone 2 movie shows up. We obviously are showing launch games. Gears of War, if I recall, we did a live demo of Gears of War with Cliffy B and the guys from Epic, showing off the Unreal. It's also, if you will, the launch of the Unreal Engine 3, which Gears of War was the poster child for it. And, games that we had, we're looking at, Cameo and Project Gotham Racing out there from Bizarre Creations in Liverpool. All of these games coming together. That was, and it was, I think it was just a monumental E3 because to your point, the timing of everything was going to be key. It was when I think, again, Jack Trenton and Kazurai decided that you were going to work overtime to afford a PlayStation 3 at whatever that was, $599. So all, and I'm with you. E3s, I must have done 15 of them. They do become a blur, but that 2005 would have been a big one because of the nature of what was coming down the pike before the next E3.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I went to Matt at Sakana and I asked him, say, what was, let's talk about the launch, let's talk about what happened. And he said there was only 19 games that launched in the first year of the 360. So the first 2 months, basically, which I thought it feels really small by, I guess, nowadays in the digital distribution and the rise of indies and stuff, there's obviously a lot more game developers, but it felt quite a tight lineup. The best-selling game was Call of Duty 2, which, Xbox 360 sold in the US 605,000 hardware units in 2025. Call of Duty 2 sold 506,000. So only 100,000 people didn't buy that game.
Attach rate. That's a good attach rate right there. Yeah, I mean, look, it was we spoiled with the Dreamcast launch as regards the number and the quality of launches. And remember, we're going into a world with the Xbox 360 of high definition, 7.1 sound. This was not an easy transition for many developers and publishers. And I also think there's something, look, how many games do you need at launch? Well, it was very much, for me, if we go back to the Dreamcast, I wish we'd have spread out a little bit some of the content so that there was always something to talk about next month. But the publishers want to be there on day one. They want the hype and the focus that the console launches had and still have, and for their title to benefit. Yeah. I mean, I didn't mind that at all. I thought 90 was probably about right.
Yeah, and because I think there were stock shortages at the start, and so you sold probably as many as you could ship, and as you were pointing out, you didn't have a competitor really. You were launching, you're the first to market. The need to have everything ready and everything firing perhaps wasn't this. You didn't need it. It wasn't necessary. And I look at Nintendo with Switch. That's the approach they took with that. They launched it with one major first-party game. Then they launched another one a month later. Then launched another one a month after that. And it was all about building the momentum over time rather than just having this big. So I think that's probably right. I was looking at some of the games. Perfect Dark Zero, which was the big anticipated Rare game. There's Madden, Need for Speed, Project Gotham 3, as you said, Cameo, Condemned, Quake 4. It was just, I don't know if you remember much about any of that lineup, but
you check your boxes, you tick your boxes in genres, right? What do you have? You've got something, Perfect Dark Zero, bringing back Joanna Dart, from the old days. And so you've got a bit of nostalgia right there. Cameo was very different. And I loved Cameo because it showed off the visual fidelity. And I demoed that a lot as I demoed Gears of War in the run-up. And you got to have your driving title. This is the days when you can't launch without a driving title. So PGR became, if you will, our Gran Turismo competitor, albeit slightly different type of driving experience. And and you got your shooters. I mean, you've got to be able to, and you got obviously your sports games with Madden for the US anyway, because you got EA Sports involved, which was great. And it kind of ticked all the boxes. You got a game for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's a question of sequencing releases. And those are difficult conversations with publishers who need to make their quarter or whatever. And so you've got to, a third-party team did a brilliant job in managing, difficult conversations like, we think you should not ship this quarter. Let's ship next quarter where it's got an open window and we can give you some support and you're not going up against this title. So those are the conversations that are had still to this day, sure, with first parties.
Yeah. I was reading about the launch event of 360 in a desert, the 0 hour launch event. What do you remember about that?
A lot. Yeah. Again, back to the doing things differently, doing things uniquely, and making it gamer first, which, you go, well, of course, but in those days, it kind of wasn't that way per se. So I would say in the summer, probably July, August of 2005, I can remember this meeting now, the marketing team, all coming together in Millennium, which was our kind of off-campus headquarters for Xbox there, and talking about unique ways to thank the gamer in a way that we felt that we could do that maybe Sony couldn't do. And so we started noodling around these ideas, and it said, why don't we find a desolate location and bring enough units in and make it feel like this kind of Area 51 vibe, and put 24 hours, gamers, if they can get there from anywhere in the world, then they deserve 24 hours unfettered access to all the games we had at launch. And that's what we did. So we found an area in Palmdale, which is in the kind of Central Valley of California. Not quite the Central Valley, but very much part of U.S. Air Force stealth bombers, things like that kind of vibe to it. And we found next to a U.S. Air Force base some deserted hangars. And we thought, all right. And so we developed this 0 hour concept. We, everything was bright fluorescent green. And we decked out these massive hangars with white bean bags and demo units and games, and made sure there was plenty of food and water, and, opened these massive hangar doors at midnight. And then, let gamers all rushed in, got themselves settled in a beanbag, and pretty much never moved for the next 24 hours. We did also allow them to buy an Xbox 360. Best Buy as a partner came in and backed up trucks, and gamers were allowed to go and buy the first off the line Xbox 360 to take home with them. So it was a unique event. My marketing team did a brilliant job in a short period of time executing against it and finding the right place and doing all of the work that was necessary to give it this kind of cool discovery vibe. Again, very similar to, the types of stuff we had done earlier with I Love Bees and the Colony concept. But more to say thank you to gamers, right? And make it gamer first is what we said. And that's what 0 hour was.
What I find really fascinating is how 360 really won over third parties like very quickly. And the thing that I always note is that during the Xbox 360 era, whenever I went to a media event, a press event, it could be for the new Assassin's Creed, it could be for any game, the controller was always handed, whether it had a marketing partnership with Xbox or not. The controller was always handed was an Xbox 360 pad, right? So it's here you go, here's the game. And everything was demoed on 360 during that era. Whereas you could not say that for the PS4 era, you certainly couldn't say that for the PS2 era. And that was quite a remarkable shift. You just had this, PlayStation had this dominant platform that was number one by 100 miles. And then suddenly the very next generation, it seemed the third party momentum, the interest from like Take-Two's and EA's and Activision's very much shifted to Xbox. How did you pull that off?
Well, Microsoft in a lot of ways was disadvantaged in its legacy of who it was and what it makes and what services it delivers. But the one thing that they were and still are brilliant at is third-party relations, is managing partners, whether it's whether it's Dell, HP, IBM, or whether it's Activision, EA, or Ubisoft. And it was very much the team that came on board, this third-party team, George Peckham, Blake Fisher, John Smith, this team, seasoned team in working with third parties and bring them into the camp and asking them what they needed and how can we help. And that's where Microsoft was able to flex its muscles and deliver something that they were used to doing, which was third-party relations. Because they built platforms. Microsoft was a platform. Way before we started talking about platforms in video games. And so having developers feel good, make money on your platform was key. And Microsoft was brilliant at that. So we would make sure that third parties, and look, it's a courtship. It's who's got leverage. But that team were absolutely superb. And, I would travel the world with them. Robbie Buck and I would go and with George and with Blake and whomever happened to be, the account managers there, and we would do whatever they needed to make them feel part of our platform. I'm sure PlayStation did the same, but we had a real focus on delivering for our third parties. In the long game, as evidenced by where we are today, 20 years later, the payoff, the lifetime value of that is immense. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and obviously the big one was Grand Theft Auto, which had been seen as I know it had later come to other platforms, but it had been seen as a PlayStation brand for so long. And suddenly to have GTA 4 launch simultaneously 360, and I think you had a partnership with them. And it's that, if I remember the tattoo as well, that's probably the pinnacle of it. But obviously Call of Duty and the relationship you had there during that generation was so crucial to that.
We spent a lot of time in Take-Two's office in on Broadway in New York City. A lot of time, a great bunch, a wacky bunch to say the least. And and look, you also provide financial incentives. You build a financial model that makes it work for them. But yeah, you've got to win trust. And in those days, my good friend Paul Eibler was kind of the CEO there. This is before Strauss came in, and we had to win over, the Hauser brothers and all of the I don't want to call them eccentric, but the wildness of Take-Two's Rockstar, and even bringing Steve Ballmer into play to talk to the houses at 1E3 and convince them that we're for real and we're in the long run and we are a great platform for their content. And worked out well.
Yeah, obviously. So we're mostly focused on the launch, but obviously I think that was obviously a long-term reason for its success. And then when did you first? Well, how early was it before the technical issues, the famous Red Ring of Death? You started becoming aware that you might need to do something here. Was it shortly after launch, or was it a little bit later?
No, I think it was a little bit later. When you launch, you expect some things to come back, and you learn when they come back, but it started to creep up. After a few months, more and more, and this is where retail, in this instance, played a big part, because everybody went to retailers to get their consoles, and you started to hear little murmurings of, we're getting a lot back, more than we think. And so the technical team, Todd Holmdahl in particular, who did an amazing job under the most intense pressure on this, you bring a few back and you start looking at them, and you're scratching your head, what is going on here? And then as the problem starts to mount, and it takes 6 or 7 months for you to like, all right, get to grips with the magnitude of what's going on. And you've got a bone pile of consoles that have come back that just don't work, and colloquially called the red rings of death from the power button at the front. When you get the 4 red rings there, your console is bricked. And strange things like these kind of home solutions of wrapping a towel around it, and somehow that worked in some instances. I'm sure it didn't in the great majority of instances. But then once you start to figure out, then you've got to come up with a solution. And it took us a while to figure out what was going on, and what the solution to it would be. And so eventually, then once you've got a solution to the problem, not a solution to the technical problem, but, hey, look, your warranty is going to be extended. If you've got a problem, we're going to send you overnight a box, put your 360 in there, keep your faceplate if you want to, keep your hard drive if you want to, but we need to get it back. We'll fix it, we'll replace it, and then we'll send it back to you overnight. So you're receiving it overnight, you send it to us overnight, and then we'll send you back, in most instances, a new one overnight. And that's where a lot of the money for all of this was the overnight FedEx and DHL or whatever was being used at that time, and UPS, obviously. And but then, starting to figure out, was it the fact that we were using all lead solder in there, which was actually an EU requirement, and get, when I say all lead, no lead, and get all the lead out? And was that causing heat? Were the fans in the right place? All of these things, trying to figure out whether, and there was a theory that wrapping the towel around it would create more heat, which would rejoin some of the issues of the cracks in some of the units. All of this was going on, and it was stressful. But the one thing I will always say is, this was for us a defining moment. And we, if we hadn't have done what we did, I'm not sure the Xbox brand would be around today. We spent a lot of money. I remember 1.15 billion was reserved against this. And we felt that was money well spent to hang on to a brand that we built, that we felt had huge viability going forward. And of course it does. And doing good by the gamers. And so, yeah, and it was a tough time.
The 360, from my point of view, was a phenomenally successful machine. I know it perhaps wasn't the number one selling for the generation, but to Xbox where it was the generation before to where it finished, the market share it claimed, and because I'm a Brit, I'm in the UK. In the UK, the Xbox 360 was the most successful console of that generation. It outsold the Wii. Like it was number one in the UK, and I suspect it wasn't too far off in the US either. But did the red ring of death internally take the shine off that a little bit, or was that how it was viewed amongst yourselves?
No, I think, look, the numbers are always up in the air, but I think by the time the dust settled on the 360, 120 million units worldwide. I mean, being long gone by then, I was at EA, so it was difficult for me to get a handle on all these. But and then there's does that include red ring of death units shipped, and how are you counting all these? But there is absolutely no doubt. You're right. I mean, it put us nose to nose. Probably both Sony and Microsoft said we both won because we both sold well over 100 million units. We grew the industry immensely. And why? Because we went nose to nose with each other and got the best out of each other, and invested enormously with third-party publishers because we needed the best third-party games to complement our first-party games. And so the amount of money going into the industry was huge because the competitive juices of mega corporations like Sony and Microsoft, multi-$100 billion market caps, and seeing the opportunity that the games provided to get to a demographic that they typically weren't. Sony was leaning more heavily early on games because their dominance in television and music all of a sudden started to wane, and the Samsungs of this world were coming in, and their previous dominance in televisions, for example, with kind of the Sony Trinitron, if you remember all of this, and Bravia and stuff, all of a sudden the Samsungs and LGs were starting to come in. And so Sony says, all right, where is growth coming from? And games was the answer.
Competition is good. I was going to say this. A lot of the time when things fade away, I think it's when you've got a dominant player that's, they're not necessarily, I'm not saying they're being lazy, but there's no need to find that extra mile if there's if you're on your own and you don't have two great competitors going head to head. It's going to improve quality, it's going to generate interest and attention, and therefore grow everything. And I think probably PlayStation view the PlayStation view the PS3 era as a bit of a downer because obviously they lost almost half their audience from one generation to the next. But it was still I suspect they made more money, when you factor in all the additional revenue channels. So
yeah,
and
the way you look at it is,
was like
rising tide lifts all ships, right? And so Microsoft's entree into the market created a massive rising tide. Billions of dollars into marketing, advertising, R&D. And, I don't think the industry would be anywhere close to what it is today if Microsoft wasn't involved. Let's not forget the amount of work we were doing in PC, which was a core part of our business way before, the games on Windows, before it got into the console business, and still is for Microsoft, and games drives PC adoption, and GPU, CPU purchases and graphics cards and all of the things in there. So games became this direct and indirect catalyst for technology to explode in a very different way than any other entertainment medium could do.
I'll wrap up with one last question, which is there anything, what sticks in your memory from those early years, of maybe that first year of the 360 launch? Is there anything that when you look back on that time is the first thing that jumps to your mind?
It was such a different vibe and environment for me, from being a subsidiary, a president of Sega America, and bluntly fighting with my Japanese overlords on a regular basis, to being right in the middle of the decision making. So the real difference, and it took me a while, but when you're a subsidiary of a Japanese company, you're 17 hours time difference on the West Coast, and it's like, and you got to be flying over there every 3 weeks, which I did, and and the pressure that was on you, because Japanese SOJ, Sega Japan, the kind of launch had stagnated a little bit. SOE over there, okay, but wasn't there, and all of the eyes were on SOA, Sega America, to deliver against it, to keep this thing alive. So, but you're constantly having to wait for an answer, or get on a plane, and fly 14 hours with a 17-hour time difference to go to Haneda, Tokyo, and sit in a room all day, fighting and arguing and trying to make your point. There was nobody at Microsoft other than us that were making decisions. The one thing I would say very much that Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer allowed us to get on with it and check in with them. They both had a great interest, Bill in particular, in what we were doing, but they also allowed us to be off campus. We were not part of what's known as the Borg. We were off campus, and we had our own kind of bunch of rebels that were either Microsoft employees that loved games and joined there, or we brought in key people from the industry and developed this camaraderie about what we were doing. And it was refreshing to me to be part of that, and not having to look around for somebody to make a decision. Decision was ours.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Peter, for your time. Are you actually plugging your book yet, or are you? Is that you saving?
I mean, I've got to finalize all of the deals, but it will be available this fall, and it will be my life story, warts and all, for my life from young lad in Liverpool all the way to being a PE teacher in North Wales, to emigrating to America and selling soccer shoes and being involved in sports marketing. 44 years of age, changing my career to get into video games, and then, eventually getting out of games for the one job that I would ever move back to the rainy UK for, which is to be CEO of Liverpool Football Club.
What?
Yeah, so an interesting journey. I'm not perfect, and it's a proper autobiography. My personal issues, my professional challenges, all of the things that I believe a real autobiography should have. But yeah, it'll be out. It'll be out this fall, this autumn in the UK, as well as here in the US.
I'll be there day one.
It's called Game Changer. So that's the title. That's as much as I'll give you.
Well, all right. Well, I'll have to, come find you to get it signed. I'm hoping you do a book tour.
I'll most definitely be over there.
All right, but I'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate this. You didn't need to do it, and I really, really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
I found what Peter said there really interesting. Look, it's clearly a different industry today. This was a time when things like digital libraries didn't keep people within one ecosystem. It was a time pre-social media. Gaming communities existed, of course, but they were arguably less sticky than they are today. The idea of people going from one console to another wasn't quite as unimaginable as the idea of people switching consoles today, going from PlayStation to Xbox or vice versa. But even so, I think the fundamentals still ring true. Xbox made sure it had a strong slate of games on Xbox 360, led by Call of Duty. It promoted them strongly and in unique ways. It had the right price and made sure to focus on what was important, delivering good games that really resonated with players. I think that's sort of what Microsoft is trying to do today. It's building a strong slate of games, led by Call of Duty. It's trying new ways of marketing and getting these games in front of players. It has various business models at different price points for different people. And hopefully, these good games that it's making can start resonating with its audience. That's always the crucial bit. Xbox might not be all about the console anymore. It is a very different organization in many ways, but I still think there's a bit of 360 in the modern Xbox. That's it for today's episode of The Game Business Show. Make sure to sign up to our newsletter at thegamebusiness.com if you haven't already. Alternatively, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on your podcasting platform of choice. That way you'll never miss an episode. Until next time, thanks for tuning in.